Hello everyone, I wanted to read more from my new book, Intense Design, specifically from chapter 10, which is sort of an applications part of the book. The first part of the book talks about creativity and Skunk Works background and so on. And this is just sort of the summary of the legacy of Skunk Works, and I'd like to read that to you. And this is again the middle of chapter 10. The art of the Sistine Chapel was done by Michelangelo and 13 workers under his supervision. The workers' names are lost to history, and only Michelangelo's remains. We often ascribe names to important works as a means of illustrating human potential and elevating our self-concept. Our desire to make heroes is seen in Skunk Works, where Kelly Johnson's personality was so pervasive that any successful activity was projected upon Johnson's codified rules. And these are the 14 rules that I talked about earlier. Consequently, the rules gained more value than they probably deserved. However, the culture that developed the Skunk Works in the form of stories and past successes was a powerful force. A new employee would feel compelled to prove himself or herself, not letting anything encumber creative thoughts. Like Michelangelo's workers, Skunk Works designers were anonymous. No heroic brand label personalities worked in the design groups. However, these designers perceived themselves to be creative and worked in an environment where creativity was part of the culture. Therefore, they were creative. The sociological models, which there's discussion of sociological and psychological models earlier in the book, but quite frankly, that's sort of dry. It doesn't lend to good reading, but that's sort of the first part. In any event, the sociological models of individual self and its relation to groups suggest that people benefit from group participation and identification. One's selection of the group in which to identify with can have consequences beyond the functioning of that group. The group can in turn define one's self-worth. Moreover, this relationship between self and group can adversely affect one's view of those outside one's group. Group role developments have practical implications because effective groups benefit from a variety of roles. And group dynamics and group roles is discussed earlier too, which is really important and interesting. Although this inquiry had limited access to group behavior, the available evidence indicates a high level of group maintenance activity, which is predicted by studies of behavior in mature, productive groups. The evaluation of creativity is difficult and possibly invasive exercise to conduct with this extraordinary human ability. So that's kind of verbose, but I'm just saying it's hard to judge creativity without interfering with it. Jung noted, Carl Gustav Jung, which I talked about earlier, noted, quote, "As long as we ourselves are caught up in the process of creation, we neither see nor understand. Indeed, we ought not to understand, for nothing is more injurious to immediate experience than cognition." And that's, I'll read that twice. I can do that, because it's really a great concept, just a lot of words, but said more eloquently than I can. It's a direct quote from Jung. So he says again, "As long as we ourselves are caught up in the process of creation, we neither see nor understand. Indeed, we ought not to understand, for nothing is more injurious to immediate experience than cognition." So live in the moment and don't analyze it. Evaluating creativity is a subjective process. The design history of Skunk Works doesn't illustrate design epiphanies, but rather a methodical series of creative steps that led to a highly creative product. This is not a romantic notion of the design process. However, it is effective. We should be impressed by the ability of the small group of people to push their way through numerous challenges to design an esoteric product. This is especially true when the group resides within a large corporate environment such as Lockheed Martin. Skunk Works' high efficiency and small group approaches were rooted in the intense demands of World War II. From this extraordinary beginning, the organization's creative design accomplishments derive from the concomitant effects of leadership, mythology, and small, empowered groups. Skunk Works brought in talent as required for projects and therefore avoided the disintegration stage of many creative collaborations. The creative culture was maintained by the legacy of past success in achieving challenging goals and a mythology of greatness. And I don't mean mythology in a pejorative sense. That was the pervasive in the culture. The fact that new talent could so readily resupply the coffers delightfully underscores the propensity of all people to be creative, which is an important notion, I think. These legends and the corporate culture embodied by the 14 rules that Kelly Johnson made, and I talk about that in the book, and anyway, in the book I talk about that a bit, which aided in past quests, encouraged designers to take risks, think creatively, and perpetuate these important legends. The successes Skunk Works designers achieved were projected onto the 14 rules and other aphorisms, further reinforcing their potency and perpetuating legend. The Skunk Works designers believed that the burden of important projects rested on only a few shoulders. They were empowered by their employer and motivated by corporate culture, patriotism, and their self-identification of being creative. So that's a summary of the legacy of Skunk Works, and I appreciated the opportunity to read that. Thank you.